Well, welcome to the Get Wise webinar. So I left Christian Science. Now what? My name is Catherine Baimesha, and I'm the founder and director of the Fellowship of Former Christian Scientists. And this webinar is part of our Get Wise project, which focuses specifically on addressing the psychological damage and wounding from years, even generations of indoctrination from the destructive teaching of Christian Science. And we're really pleased to be hosting this event and to be collaborating with the Ex-Christian Scientist group on this webinar. And we're really glad you're joining in. We're so glad that you're here. And I just want to acknowledge, too, that you're really bold and courageous to be taking the step in joining us today and thinking about your past. This isn't easy and can stir up some pretty strong emotions sometimes, perhaps bring up some difficult memories or even tragic life events. So I just want to encourage you to be mindful that if you find yourself triggered or overwhelmed at any point, just to take a break and to rejoin us when you're ready. Today, we're going to be talking about first steps and principles for recovery as we consider what it means to face our past, contend with our present, and consider next steps that we could take. For many of us, leaving Christian Science involves leaving our multi-generational faith, everything we ever knew. That's the way it was for me. Some leave and don't really want to look back. We're happy just to walk away. But sooner or later, we find ourselves bumping into our past, and we feel that often quoted statement is true. You can take me out of Christian Science, but you can't take Christian Science out of me. Frequently, we don't quite understand how deeply ingrained we've been in this destructive faith system, and it can be difficult to identify that we may have even experienced trauma from it. Many of us are living in survival mode, not even knowing it, until something happens and we realize that we have to face our past. Maybe you've just hit that breaking point. We wonder, what can I do? Is the problem really with Christian Science? Is there anyone else out there who feels this way? Is there anything that can help? Well, let me tell you, you're not alone, and there are resources, care, and community out there that can help. Whether you've been out of Christian Science for just a few months or over 20 years, I think you're going to find some helpful information in this webinar for your journey. And this webinar is starting off a new series that is building on the last one, which addressed why is Christian Science still influencing my life. So I hope you check out our YouTube channel and check out these resources. You'll find sessions on trauma, emotions, identity, faith, how Mary Baker Eddy manipulated faith, and ways Christian Science is different from biblical Christianity. And we're really thankful for our Get Wise guest teachers who have been helping us create these core resources. Bob and Judy Pardon, who are cult recovery experts from Massachusetts, and Gina Roth, spiritual abuse recovery counselor from St. Louis. And today, I'm just thrilled to introduce you to Dr. Patrick Knapp and his wife Heidi from Colorado. It's been a real joy to work with Pat Knapp this semester as he served as one of our guest teachers in one of our Get Wise support groups. And now we are just really excited to hear from him and Heidi. They have so much great information to share with us. And both Pat and Heidi have a real passion for religious abuse recovery because of their own experience. Each of them have personally experienced religious abuse. And Pat was even a part of an aberrant Christian sect for 14 years. So they both really understand firsthand some of the unique challenges that we face. They both are committed Christians, but will be focusing today on the psychological damage from Christian Science. Pat has a degree from Denver Seminary and has just finished his PhD, focused on marriage and family counseling and family systems and attachment theory. And he's just published a book, Understanding Religious Abuse and Recovery, which is available on Amazon. And it's a deep dive in understanding recovery. So I encourage you to check that out. Heidi also has a wealth of experience. She has spent 25 years in study and education on recovery-related issues, including theology, psychology, and addictions counseling. They both are active in the International Cultic Studies Association, and for years have co-directed an organization, Becoming Free, which provides just wonderful resources. They have a great website with many resources that are really helpful. They're both certified life coaches. And they facilitate support and recovery groups for people recovering from religious abuse. And in fact, Heidi's going to be facilitating a 10-week online women-only support and recovery group for people coming out of religious abuse just in mid-January of the coming year. So just some great things to check out and to learn more about. They also both are co-authoring a book on marital repair following religious abuse, which should be published in late 2022. So it's just a real joy and an honor to have Pat and Heidi here today, sharing their expertise and helping us better understand our past so that we can begin to face it and to take the next steps to freedom. They will be answering questions afterwards, so please remember to ask questions through the Q&A forum so we can connect what they're talking about specifically to our own experience of leaving and recovering from Christian Science. Again, thank you, Pat and Heidi, for being here today. We're so looking forward to hearing what you have to share with us.
Welcome. I'm Heidi.
And I'm Pat.
And we're going to tell you a little bit about our organization, Becoming Free. One of the things that we hold is very important is that recovery from harmful religious experience is possible.
We offer support and recovery groups, educational conferences, lectures, workshops, and webinars, of which this is our very first one, which has been a little bit challenging, but please give us a lot of grace. And we do offer life coaching, life recovery coaching as well for those that have been through religiously abused backgrounds. We've been in the field of religious abuse recovery since 1984. We want to give a special thanks today to Catherine Bon Etch with Fellowship of Former Christian Scientists. She has been very supportive of our work, and we certainly are very supportive of the work that she's doing with the former Christian Science community. A couple of qualifiers before we get too far in. Heidi and I both are very aware that there is a massive amount of work to be done processing abuse that has occurred in religiously abusive systems. And certainly this is true of Christian Science. Recovery can be an incredible adventure, though, but it does not require a mind-altering self-effort.
And recovery is also not all on your shoulders. It's not all your responsibility. We understand the need that you will have for a team of people, for a group of supporters around you in various capacities to help you through different aspects of your recovery. It's also important and necessary and healthy to realize that we're going to be offering you a good bit of material today, and some of that material is going to, really resonate with you right now, and you're going to want to work with it. And if some doesn't, that's okay too. There's recovery is a process. There's time, gracious time for yourself to work with different areas at different points in your journey of recovery. One of the things that we like to stress and share with all people that are recovering from religious abuse is that recovery requires that you grow to be kinder and more gracious with yourself. Offering yourself that grace will go a long way in your healing process. Religious abuse is also neither new nor rare. When people hear the word cult, they tend to think of the poison Kool-Aid of Jonestown or the deadly fires of Waco. We know that cult encompasses a lot more than that, but the culture, general culture at large, when they hear that term, they go to these extremes, and they don't understand how damaging some groups can actually be that don't make the headlines, but run very deep, such as Christian Science.
Many, in the course of human history, have experienced religious abuse. We identify here just four. We won't go into a great deal of detail, but one was John Muir. You may be aware of the man, you may not be aware that he was not only a very prominent person in the course of establishing the National Park Service, but he was also heavily religiously abused by his father, who was a Presbyterian pastor, who used to literally beat him to get him to memorize and to hold on to Scripture. And he got to the point, we are aware now, he got to the point, John Muir did, where he could recite almost the entire New Testament and a sizable portion of the Old. But he was beaten during the whole process, and that really soured him for traditional Christianity. And that's part of why he became more of a person who would hold to a naturalist worldview with some Christian terms, but again meaning something different, primarily because of the abuse that he went through. Yes. Vincent van Gogh, we might be well aware of him as a painter, an Impressionist painter, very famous. We may not be aware that he was initially, before he became a painter, he was looking to become a missionary to the poor. And that was really a passion of his, and he tried that for a while, and sadly his missionary organization dismissed him from that because he actually wanted to live among the poor, and they didn't want that. So that had huge negative impact on him the rest of his life. Martin Luther, the Protestant reformer, somebody that I've heard in the past that has more written on him concerning him than anybody in all of history, with the possible exception of Jesus Christ. He was certainly religiously abused by the Catholics of his day, and he was himself abusive in some respects to some of the Jews of his day. Joan of Arc, a Catholic leader, a military leader actually for a period of time, was certainly abused by the Catholic Church, and eventually she was burned at the stake. Very unfortunate. But many such occurrences throughout history, specific to Christian Science.
Yeah, Marilyn Monroe. She had a very troubled childhood and had a mother with mental illness. So she ended up living with various people throughout the course of her upbringing. And one of those people she became very affectionate with, who had quite an influence on her. And it was a woman who was very strongly associated with Christian Science. She called her Aunt Anna. And Marilyn was influenced, and that influence stayed with her really throughout her life. She later did explore some Freudian thought as well as the Baptist theology, and eventually she converted to Judaism a little later on in her life through a marriage.
Yeah, Ellen DeGeneres, TV talk show, she was raised as a Christian Scientist for many years, eventually rejected it, and is now really outspoken about her denial of its value and its legitimacy. Robin Williams of TV and movies, another one who was raised in a Christian Science family.
Robert Duvall was another one. He had a mother that was a Christian Scientist, and he grew up as a Christian Scientist, held to the belief system for a long time. Eventually, he stopped going to the church, and now it's kind of questionable where he stands with religious science. He doesn't attend church, but there's some mixed messages about where he stands with the belief system there. But he also has been influenced by the Southern Baptists, particularly in the Deep South, some of the African-American Southern Baptist churches down there.
Val Kilmer, another movie star, very heavily invested in the Christian Science world. himself raised as a Christian Scientist, and he, about a decade ago, he had a bad case of throat cancer that he nearly died from. He threw up blood at one point in time. His kids witnessed that, and really, as a non-believing Christian Scientist, they encouraged him strongly to get to some medical care, and he finally did. Christian Science has both similarities and unique features in contrast with other religiously abusive systems. It's important to keep in mind contrast is a mother of clarity. That's a quote from Os Guinness. One of the contrasts on the similar side, similar to religiously other religious abusive systems, Christian Science holds to really a form of mind control. It's very dominant. There's a lot of pretending that is a basic rule within the system itself, pretending that you aren't feeling a certain way, pretending something is not really happening that is happening. There's a high level of performance-based high pressure within the system. That's certainly very common among a lot of groups. Theologically indefensible, philosophically contradictory. We would hold that it's historically flawed, logically unsound. It denies the value of psychology. A lot of groups will do that. Most of them will. Very insular in their group dynamics. They're commonly confused as Christians. A lot of groups are viewed as Christian in some sense. On the unique features, commonly Christian Science is certainly multi-generational, Gnostic in its worldview. It's diminishing. It has over the last 20 years, particularly 30 years, in its membership. The core focus is on a control of one's thinking. Its stated purpose is to restore healing through prayer, often with denial of medical supports. It denies what philosophically is known as propositional truth. God is a principle, not a person. It promotes a form of self-salvation. It's founded by a woman and her writing, Mary Baker Eddy, Health and Science and Key to the Scriptures, where she redefines a lot of the terms that are used within the Scriptures, within the Bible. And within that book and her other writings, there's foundational material that she came up with that was very heavily plagiarized by other, from other sources, which she never gives credit for. So we can give documentation if you need that. It's very easy.
Go ahead.
So why do so few Christian Scientists choose to address their need for recovery from the religious abuse that they have experienced in their past?
The common experience that we've kind of come up and thought through is fear. And fear of the past, reprisal or dismissal by family and friends, lost time and opportunities, buried trauma would be connected to fear of the past, fear of the present, feeling overwhelmed, lack of supportive relationships that they can go to, and not knowing who they are now that they're out of Christian Science. Fear of the future. What will be my new purpose? What about the unknown? How do I proceed forward from here?
Contending with these fears can be overwhelming. Where does one begin? Commonly, people don't have a clue what the questions are, let alone what the possible answers are.
Yes, true.
It's important to take the time, the risk, and the effort to find former members and connect with them for support and encouragement. At the same time, it's also important that we understand that all former members of whatever group, whether it's Christian Science or otherwise, have their limitations. They're going to be in process themselves also.
Yes, absolutely.
Looking for professional and semi-professionals with informed insight and experience. This is one of the things that we've heard also from Catherine, and we would certainly strongly support the idea that that's an important feature, depending on the level of trauma.
Yes, exactly. And looking for professionals or semi-professionals that not only understand trauma, but hopefully finding some that understand the complications of religious abuse, how deep that can go. While individual recovery is always unique, there are also some basic categories of recovery, and they are
Basic categories of philosophical categories dealing with the false Gnostic belief system of Christian Science. That's important along the way to work with. Theologically, to better understand one's belief about God and humankind. That's an area that needs to, over the course of time, needs to be wrestled with. Psychologically, for improved understanding of emotion and behavior. Sociological, to better appreciate the nature and importance of social issues. And then finally, physiological, and this is particularly important within Christian Science, to reevaluate and experience the rightful place of medical science. Those are all important categories. Overwhelmed, that's certainly a feeling that we hear a lot from people that have come out of religiously abused backgrounds. We certainly felt that when we came out of our backgrounds, and we came out of kind of a Bible-based group that was, groups that were very damaging, and as a consequence we felt overwhelmed. But there's a lot of complicated problems that can sometimes be better addressed by identifying a basic theoretical framework in order to start getting your arms around the whole topic. And to this end, we suggest that you consider 6 essential value-driven principles to understand and recover from religious abuse. And that's under the acronym SECURE, SECURE.
Yes, and so we're going to go ahead and go through the SECURE acronym with you. And today we hope to unpack a little bit of the first 3. The last 3, I think we'll have to wait for another time because it would be way too involved to do that. But we've got safe haven and a secure base. This is extremely important. Healthy human attachment, being able to find and identify healthy relationships that can be supportive to you. Emotions, authentically learn to value your emotions, to identify emotions and to value them. Cognitive focus, differently understood than in Christian Science, utilizing your cognitive skills and abilities to actually help you heal from your traumatic experience or difficult experience with Christian Science.
Unconditional positive regard, relationships, and education about family systems theory. These are things we're not going to get to today. But again, keep in mind as we move through the first 3 that contrast is a mother of clarity. That'll help kind of get your arms around this.
Okay, well, safe haven and a secure base are attachment concepts. Safe haven is an emotionally safe relationship that offers comfort and security in times of stress and duress. And research has shown that this condition most commonly occurs in a family of origin situation in the relationship with the mother or mother figure and results in encoded attachment patterns later in life.
Secure base, a supportive relationship that encourages one's exploration of the world, creating a sense of personal competence and healthy autonomy or independence. Research has shown typically that comes most often from the father or father figure, and it becomes embedded early on to promote an attachment pattern throughout life. And you might qualify all this too, is that this concept of a safe haven and a secure base, while many families provide those in a limited sort of way. No family is perfect. There's always going to be shortcomings. Our belief is that Christian Science, those coming from that background, typically deny or misunderstand the importance of a safe haven and a secure base, at least in a consistent way. They just don't adhere to it well. Unpacking the concept of safe haven and secure base, and again doing a compare and contrast. Under Christian Science, relationships do not feel safe. The contrast to that is that emotional safety is crucial for human development.
Yeah, in Christian Science, little to no authentic comfort and security, since, as we said earlier, you have to do a lot of pretending. And in a recovery alternative, relational comfort and security will drives the recovery process. So again, finding those safe places that you can actually be your real self and express what you're really thinking and feeling.
Within Christian Science, there's an encoded damaging relational patterns that take place. On the recovery side, there's healthy attachment patterns, which leads to relational success ultimately.
In Christian Science, it promotes an unhealthy autonomy of yourself. Healthy autonomy under recovery alternative involves interdependency, meaning the freedom to be able to enter into relationships in a healthy way and actually be able to respect and create boundaries for yourself and learning to respect other people's boundaries.
There's a denial within Christian Science of social science research, whereas on the recovery side, it affirms social science research, and particularly in the area of attachment theory and family systems theory.
In Christian Science, limits personal growth, limiting particularly in your thought life, not being able to really learn to think for yourself, but of course adhering continuously to the teachings of Mary Baker Eddy. In recovery, the alternative is that promotion of personal growth, which developing your thought life, your emotions, your relational sphere in healthy ways can absolutely start adding to your personal health and growth.
Finally, parental relationships within Christian Science typically were commonly very damaging. On the recovery side, a parental type of relationship or relationships that consistently affirm and support can be hugely beneficial in the course of recovery.
Absolutely.
Rather than damage. Ways to build a safe haven and a secure base.
And learning about practical attachment concepts and language. And this can happen to some degree through reading books on attachment theory. It can be very helpful to start understanding it and processing it.
Also, risking the exploration of other social communities that can help you to redefine safe and unsafe people. Become more aware of what is safe, what safe feels like, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later.
Yeah, and actually this is probably a really good time to just add that we have some material even through our organization that gives some guidelines to being able to, when you're entering back into choosing relationships, what does healthy look like? What does safe look like? So we have some guidelines on that. We'd be more than happy if you want to send us an email to be able to send you some material that might be helpful to you in that way.
And learn about codependency and mind control. Surround yourself with healthy people and limit the unhealthy ones. And I know that's not always easy because you may have several family members that are still heavily involved. So there's just, I'm not saying you chuck them all, but I think there's good ways and helpful ways you can limit your contact with them, which can help your recovery.
Sure. Just exploring the concepts of relationship, boundaries, family systems, again, through reading some good books that we might recommend or that others might recommend. So boundaries, rules, and roles within a family system can actually be very helpful to building your autonomy and your relationship sphere.
In the course of that, experiencing some professional counseling and mentoring can be very beneficial.
Yes.
Because finally, and very often late in the recovery process, we find that people need to explore their own family history. That doesn't typically come early, that comes a little bit later, because that's a huge task and sometimes incredibly threatening to a person.
Yes, absolutely. And we also know the importance of valuing emotions. Emotions need to be valued and explored. And from what we understand with Christian Science, they need to even start becoming identified. Emotions through Christian Science are controlled by the system. In the recovery alternative, emotions are freely experienced and expressed.
Emotions are not differentiated within Christian Science, and on the recovery side, emotions are well defined. They aren't kind of foggy and fuzzy. They're a lot more well defined.
Many emotions in Christian Science are not valued. In the recovery alternative, the full spectrum of emotions are valued and can actually become helpful teaching tools in a sense. Learning to, when you identify your emotions and you're in certain situations, that your emotions give you information and can be very helpful.
And finally, emotions can hinder spirituality within Christian Science. And the recovery pieces, emotions can actually be drawn from to help build one's spirituality, in the sense that one becomes more authentic because they're free to express their own emotions, rather than emotions that are determined or pushed by a system.
Absolutely.
Growing one's emotional world, activities to promote and value the proper role of emotions.
Learn about the intrinsic value and role of emotions through the social sciences. Do you want to add to that?
Yes, I think certainly there are several good books that we can suggest on that, and resources, again, that we can kind of point to. I think that would be beneficial, social science material.
See a professional therapist or a life coach for just support as you walk through the process. Someone that has the understanding, again, as we said earlier, of understanding trauma, understanding religious abuse, and just can be just a supportive place to just simply start unpacking your experience, can absolutely be helpful in experiencing safety as you express some emotions, and help, again, zeroing in and learning to identify more clearly some of your emotions through relationship.
And as you experience that safety within a therapeutic or life coach relationship, go outside your default relational comfort zone. Initially, that doesn't feel good. I mean, it can be very challenging. Begin identifying emotions through creative efforts.
Yes. Yeah, we have worked with people through our coaching process and had done some very interesting exercises on the psychology of color as it relates to emotions. Some easy exercises where you apply colors to paper, and you start taking what's confusing on the inside and you kind of externalize it through the drawing a painting or expression of color on paper, whatever medium you choose to use. And we absolutely would be happy to send some of those simple exercises to you as well, and explain a little bit more specifically how they're done and how they can be helpful. A helpful tool in identifying your emotions and guiding you in the healing process.
And as you become healthier in your emotional world, hang with what you find to be emotionally healthy people. Seek to define what makes them happy and fulfilled. Particularly spend time with small children. Small children are incredible magnets for a host of emotions and feelings, and can sometimes really teach us a lot.
Yeah, it's very true. That's good. We also suggest making use, which we have used in groups and in our coaching practice, making use of an emotion wheel and pictures of various emotion-filled faces to help identify your own feelings in a given moment or experience. So those things can actually be very helpful as well.
And finally, see emotionally rich movies. Appreciate passionate people and cultures. You know, we aren't all readers. Heidi and I happen to be. But we also enjoy movies a lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we can learn a lot from movies, particularly those that are that have expressions of healthy emotion.
Yes,
It
absolutely.
can be very helpful.
And again, on our website, we have some movies listed.
I think on our website we do have some suggestions in terms of good movies to be able to do that. Define your cognition or your thinking world. Again, we have a comparison and contrast here. Within Christian Science, thinking makes it so. The recover alternative is that reality is discovered, it's not created, it's not something that we have control of.
Yes, actually. And in Christian Science, the world is perfect. But in the recovery alternative is really coming to the reality and facing the terms that the world is not perfect. And you don't need to pretend. We can see it for what it is and live in reality and not have to pretend.
All of reality is your responsibility within Christian Science. Within the recovery option, reality is not determined by you. There's a lot of other things that feed into how it is that one can discover reality rather than to feel responsible to make it happen.
Absolutely, so true. In Christian Science, proper thinking determines authentic spirituality. In the recovery alternative, the life of the mind can enhance, but does not determine true spirituality.
And finally, within Christian Science, there's a huge tendency to compartmentalize cognition, whereas in recovery, cognition can and needs to be integrative in character, integrated with the emotions, integrated with other things in the person's life. Some of the activities to redefine the use of our cognitive selves. Study the rules of logic, formal and informal fallacies.
Read well-written, articulate books.
And we got a lot of suggestions
We
there. Heidi and I do a lot of reading together.
We do.
And we really seek out some good articulate books, not just subjects that we particularly have interest in or related to religious science or to Christian Science or Jehovah's Witnesses or Mormons, but in terms of just history, in terms of novels also.
Right.
Hang with and listen to and learn from people with different perspectives.
Yeah. Important. Ask questions until you get satisfactory answers. You know, it's amazing, but over kind of an overarching theme with religiously abusive groups, and Christian Science is no exception, that asking questions is not okay, you know. At least in many groups it's not okay. And we just say, ask questions, ask lots of questions. It is okay, and it's the way we learn.
Broaden one's education to include unfamiliar interdisciplinary fields, then seek to evaluate and decide their value.
Study, and if possible, visit other cultures.
Become passionate about something other than those things which are directly religious or feel religious to you.
Learn a new language or artistic endeavor.
Eat healthy exercise, rest, and take care of your physical body.
Increase your value of medical and mental health professionals.
Conclusions. What are our conclusions? It's important to face our past, to contend with our present, to give consideration to what the future might look like. And I know Catherine is certainly engaged in this in a deep way with her organizations, with her organization of Fellowship of Former Christian Scientists. Certainly we are as well. We want to help people find a plan for how they can recover and to be able to find a future that is more promising and more hopeful.
Absolutely.
Because there is hope. And bottom line is, you're not alone. That's important too.
Absolutely, so true.
One of the things that we want to suggest to you are 5 resources that you can go to. Catherine's the Fellowship of Former Christian Scientists, Meadowhaven, Bob and Judy Pardon. We have the websites there. Also, Gina Roth and Revision Counseling. Her email is listed. International Cultic Studies Association. This is a organization we have a very deep and long history with that we highly recommend. It's primarily secular in nature, but there is a Christian wing of it, and certainly some Christians that are involved in that organization. And then finally, Becoming Free, the one that Heidi and I are a part of, and want to do all we can to help and support others in their recovery. So, with that, we really want your questions.
Absolutely.
So if you would please give those to us. Well, thank you, and we'll be talking with you soon.
Pat and Heidi, thank you for what a wonderful wealth of information there. Just really helpful considerations as we start facing our past. So first of all, I just want to say thank you for just some really rich content. As we think about this, I had some questions, but feel free. We hope people will be asking questions. Oh, good. Yeah. Send in your questions because we want to answer them live. We want to be connecting it to what you're experiencing, what you're facing right now, what's on your heart and mind as you think about taking next steps. But, as we begin here, you mentioned religious abuse, and we've talked about cult recovery, and we've talked about spiritual abuse recovery. You talk about religious abuse recovery. Are there differences? Is it basically the same? Is there anything unique you might add to that or define that maybe?
Yes, I think we would we suggest that there's a lot of crossover, obviously, between religious or spiritual or cultic recovery. We prefer the term religious in that it has a fewer connotations of poison Kool-Aid or big fires that kill a lot of people, and the majority of those that have experienced abuse within a religious context do not experience it in big public sort of ways commonly. So we want to be a little more inclusive in our terminology.
Yes.
Okay. So religious abuse kind of maybe covers a little bit more, maybe some of those things that maybe fall in the cracks, maybe.
Yeah, it's a little broader,
broader topic.
more inclusive, and I think it's I think more helpful for people to get their arms around than just to make it a black and white cult. I mean, it's not to say that there aren't groups that are certainly, we would contend, that are absolutely cultic and that we would refer to as cults. But I think for the sake of discussion, it's a little more helpful to refer to the abuse that occurs within the religious setting, hence religious abuse.
Yeah, great. And another question here says, define the kind of abuse CS did to us. I mean, would you say that Christian Science, from what you're learning, is religious abuse?
Absolutely. Would you like to take part of that? You want me to?
Yeah, I think part of it. I mean, I'm still acquainting myself with a lot of the Christian Science doctrine, and what you were imprinted with at such young ages, especially being second generation. But it has such a strong vein of psychological abuse connected to the emotional, which kind of then goes into the physical. And it's sort of it has a domino effect in what you came out of, and how there's a lot to unpack both in your thinking psychologically, and then in your emotions, and then being able to learn to honor yourself and take care of yourself physically. So I just see it as having it's very, very entwined, internally. And it starts with the different doctrinal beliefs that Mary Baker Eddy inflicted literally on her followers.
Yeah. Yeah, we're getting a question kind of piggybacking on that, offer specific problems Christian Science people are dealing with or experiencing, not just religiously, but more in common life. And you kind of did that, but I think you mentioned some of them, but could we expand a little bit more on that? I think one you mentioned was like that burden of like feeling all of reality was our responsibility.
Right.
I mean, that's a huge burden. That's a huge
Yeah, weight.
weight, and it's not true, which is we actually don't have control over all of reality. So that's one. Can you think of maybe a couple others?
Yeah, I think one of the big ones in my mind is the emotional abuse of denying um, the authentic feelings that people have of fear
Mhm.
and feelings of anxiety.
Mhm.
Those are not values
Mm.
that are embraced within CS,
Mm.
and instead are, if anything, ridiculed and
Yeah.
seen as a sign of lack of spirituality.
May I comment too? And I'm sort of, as I'm listening to Pat and you, Katie, I'm hearing too that that there was a conditioning of repression.
Mm-hmm.
So repressing reality and your emotions and the truth. And I think that one of the difficulties, one area is the learning how to stop repressing and being able to let yourself free to start accepting and embracing truth and your emotions and your thinking, your own individual thinking. So recovery from specifically how to set yourself free from repressing. And I think counselors would probably have a very good counselors on being able to give tools in that area. And is there any books that you can think about that might help with that particular part of injury for Christian Science?
Well, I think a lot of the emotional injury comes in the form of attachment injuries.
Yeah.
And there certainly are some very good books on the topic of attachment and what does healthy relational attachment look like, what does unhealthy and insecure attachment looks like. Probably one of the best ones and most popular of recent publication is Sue Johnson's work called.
Most recent one?
Yes.
Created for Connection?
Yeah. No, not Created for Connection.
The new one. I forgot.
No, the secular one that she did prior to.
She did Hold Me Tight and Love
Hold Me
Sense.
Tight. Hold Me Tight. Thank you. Yeah, the book Hold Me Tight. That is a secular book, specifically on the issue of what does healthy attachment look like? What is attachment? What does it look like? What is healthy? What is secure? She refers to secure attachment and insecure attachment. And that would absolutely be one that we would strongly affirm.
And another book called Faithful Feelings would be a very helpful one to be able to start recognizing, honoring, identifying, and also the freedom to start valuing and expressing feelings. Again, going back to that conditioning of repression, that the book Faithful Feelings would have a lot to offer.
Yeah, and that's written by Matthew Elliott, and that's specifically written with those that identify as Christians. So just kind of a heads up, if that is not your interest or not your go-to at this point in time, the Sue Johnson book, Hold Me Tight, may be one that could be more beneficial to you at this point in time. But otherwise, the Faithful Feeling books, that was certainly for me personally, that was a huge book that opened up my eyes to the value and the place of emotions and feelings that in the past I had really buried for many years.
I think one of the things you said that really hit me was that we can't really get answers if we don't know the questions, or you said something like that, that it's really hard to know what the answers are if you don't even know what the questions are.
Yeah.
And I think that's a lot of what we face as former Christian Scientists, and what you're talking about. Just seems like it's really hard to be. I mean, to some extent, it's like our humanity was denied in Christian Science. Just being a person, being a somebody, with emotions, and not being in control of everything, and not being able to create your own reality. Actually engaging in the world. And so, it's actually really helpful, like these lists that you shared with us. I mean, I just think we could go back and read them, and even give them to a counselor, or give them to a life coach, give them to, someone to say, help us with this, because it may be that this isn't going to happen overnight. Is that right? Recovery. So what's the timeline with recovery?
Oh, wow.
As long as it takes.
As long as it takes. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, we've worked with people that have been out for 25 years and still very much in process. I've been out of the group that I was in for 37 years, and I'm still working through a variety of things.
Yes, myself included.
So it is absolutely a process. And some of the initial questions, to kind of go to that a question that you had, Katie, was that the topics that we very commonly start with when we start working with the people are topics like, why am I feeling so emotionally triggered? Triggers, emotional triggers are huge for people in the course of recovery. Another basic early topic is, well, what do you mean by mind control? What is mind control? One of the books specifically written that I'll promote here, absolutely, for Christian Scientists, Linda Kramer has one of Perfect Peril, Christian Science and Mind Control. Outstanding book on the topic. That's another good place to start.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Well, and I guess, with that, then how do you know when you're ready to start? I mean, is there a time, if it feels, you say, people don't start because they feel fear. How do you know that it's time, that you're ready?
Well, fear is going to be there for a long time. So to a certain degree, you have to kind of plow through the fear and risk. If you wait until you're no longer fearful, chances are you aren't going to do any recovery. It's just not going to happen. But you work with the fear in the areas that you feel most attracted to.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. That recovery is done in layers. It's and you really do take on certain aspects of recovery at different times in one's life. And I think if a person is feeling like, wow, I really want to work with this area, I really want to address this, I really want to be freed from it. I was just thinking, you were mentioning courage, Katie, in the very beginning of, our webinar today, and I just thought of the phrase that I've heard before, that courage is basically not the absence of fear, but it's moving forward in spite of fear. You know, you move beyond it. You want it so bad. I want to tackle this. I need to get on top of this. Yeah. So even though fear is there, your courage just takes you forward. And I think that's part of being readiness, really, is you're ready to say, you know what, I want to deal with this, and I'm gonna push through the fear, and I'm gonna go for it.
Yeah, and typically, also what occurs at that juncture is there's a snapping, an emotional, a cognitive kind of snapping that occurs. It's like, okay, that's it, that's all. You know, I need to work with this. I'm tired of it. Yes. I don't care whether I'm you know, comfortable fully or not. I'm going to plow through. I'm going to find some people that I can trust, and that's huge.
Yeah.
Finding trustworthy people that can listen to your story and not be critical.
Yes.
But to give unconditional positive comments is huge in the course of recovery.
Yeah. Wow, that's great. Yeah, and so maybe if you're if you're even thinking about recovery, you know, you're probably ready, right? Like you're probably ready, even if you're doing this exploratory work.
Yeah.
You know, and someone asked here, any suggestions on how to find a local therapist that would be helpful, specifically with recovery from Christian Science?
Well, I think I would. The unfortunate thing is that sometimes in the course of finding a therapist, we experience this ourselves personally. We've seen other people too. Sometimes you have to kiss a few frogs before you find a prince or princess, and that kind of comes with the territory to kind of give you a heads up. I think asking, being candid about asking the therapist, what do you know about thought reform or about mind control? Being candid, what do you know about cults, or can you refer somebody
that's
to me that may know more? Certainly the ICSA, International Cultic Studies Association, you have mentioned that. They are a really good resource for counselors.
Yes, they are. It's very true.
They're a large organization full of a lot of counselors, educators, people that have been in the cultic studies world for many years.
Yes.
And there's resources there.
Yeah, it's a great go-to resource, especially because ICSA has people that support the organization all across the country. So people living in various locations in the country would find some leads towards some different counselors, therapists, and coaches that understand religious abuse.
Yeah. Well, and that's something too. I mean, like the both of you, Pat and Heidi, don't have a background in Christian Science, and yet you have a lot of experience in religious abuse recovery, and so you're able to learn about Christian Science and then speak into the specific, you know, ways that we've been harmed and the specific ways that we can tools that we need to move forward. So a counselor could do that as well, right? Like it's something that you can learn about if you have a framework for what the pathway is.
Yeah, and I think maybe asking the counselor, you know, do you understand attachment theory? What is your background in attachment theory? What is your understanding of family systems theory? Do you have much understanding of family systems? Because I think that has or even addictions theory. You know, those would be three big ones, because I think each of them offer in their own way some understanding to the topic of religious abuse and recovery.
Yeah. That's really helpful. Yeah. We have a couple questions kind of about Christian Science. Just we can just see. You said one person asked, "I found where can I find documentation about how Mary Baker Eddy plagiarized?" Do you have?
Yes, absolutely. We appreciate you asking about
Yeah,
that.
you were just finding that today.
Yeah, I was just thinking on that today. Probably one of the best sources that we would suggest is Walter Martin, Martin. He has a book out that was published back in 1955. And the name of the book I actually have here somewhere. But it's a book specifically on the plagiarism that was very prevalent in Mary Baker Eddy's writing. And I'm trying to get the title here. I know I do have it.
They can always send us an email.
Yeah, you can send it. We can send it out in our email. Yeah,
sure,
that's
that'd be fine.
yeah, we can send that out. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then another question here, and
I found it. I found it.
oh, good.
It's called the Christian Science Myth. 1955 was a publication. Zondervan, I believe, was a publishing company, and Walter Martin was the author.
That's great. Yeah.
So that would be the book.
Great. Thanks. And then here's another question. Mary Baker Eddy taught that a person could be mentally assassinated. So this is a teaching. You know, our mind was so powerful. Yeah. She insisted that her husband, Mr. Eddy, was mentally poisoned with arsenic. I know it sounds irrational, but I'm afraid to say anything negative about Christian Science or admit that it is a cult because I fear I might be mentally assassinated.
Oh, wow.
Yes. So the question is, if I understand it, how do I get beyond, how do I address that without being as fearful as I am?
Yeah.
About that.
Because I think it's really common for people to fear like saying bad things or being, critical of the group that we've come out of, even if we've been hurt, right? I mean, that's pretty common. But it's hard when there's this, this teaching that almost, it almost is terrorizing you. If you say something wrong, something might happen to you.
Yeah, I think, following what you're saying, at least I think we are, fear of your own mind, fear of what your mind can do or what you verbalizing will do. I feel like that might fall under recovery from trauma. It's a traumatic pattern, having this kind of fear of your own words and fear of your own thoughts. Does that track? Does that sound like it's tracking, Katie?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm just going to suggest too that it's not only Christian Science that kind of puts that kind of thinking out.
Yeah, very true.
The group that I was involved in for 14 years put out the concept of the term was soul power, that people were exercising soul power over other people, meaning that basically they were inflicting upon other people damage through thoughts and ideas that they had. Negative thoughts and ideas. And what I would suggest in that is there's no sound reason, first of all, to believe that. I mean, I understand that people have been conditioned to it, and sometimes for many years. So it's really hard to get over that. And it's one of those things that not uncommonly groups will instill within a person. So when they leave, they kind of feel like they have, it's almost the sense that there's a bomb in my pocket that is going to go off anytime. So there's this sense of fear. Like when I came out of the group that I did, shortly after I came out, my 3-year-old son had a very bad case of pneumonia. And of course, I was thinking, because of the teaching that I had been through in my group, that was because of my disobedience to God, that this was coming down. And I had to wrestle with that and remind myself, no, I'm not going to believe that. That doesn't make good sense, really, and I'm not going to believe that. And then, as a result, he was, not as a result, but what occurred is he did eventually recover just fine from it. He's now a 42-year-old young man and doing well. But that's something that, again, we have to kind of press through those fears and give ourselves sometimes positive self-talk that says, no, that's a false notion. I'm not going to attach to that.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And that almost seems like leaning into that cognitive piece.
Yes.
Because
right.
in CS, it was cognitive, but not attached to reality.
Yeah.
So it was kind of all in your head. You could kind of almost get this philosophical reality that didn't have to be verified by our experience.
Yeah. It was
And
an
so
alternate reality. Yeah.
alternative reality, yeah. So now kind of grounding grounding ourselves actually in the world and in reality, surrounding ourselves with safe people who can help mirror back what
Yeah.
these thoughts that we're thinking, that is that consistent with reality, and then realizing just some of the terror and fear, that emotional awareness, like this secure model really is helpful. As I'm thinking about, when these pieces from Christian Science come, it's really helpful to have these supports to help us just process, what is this teaching from Christian Science? Is it consistent with reality? Is it real? Is it true? Or is there an alternative?
Yeah, I just want to say, it's like it takes the power out of the mind. It takes the power out of it. And it puts the power more in reality and good relationships and being strengthened in real healthy ways, rather than this mind taking over and creating a false sense of feelings and reality.
Yeah.
So yes, that's a great way to look at it.
And the mirroring that you just mentioned, Catherine, is certainly important.
Yes,
Because a lot of how people see themselves are through the contact and relationship with other people. So that's why it's important for those that are leaving Christian Science to find healthy relationships of those that have either already left, ideally, and are in the process of recovery, or others that maybe have not had experience with Christian Science, but are very self-differentiated, meaning they are very much able to be themselves, as opposed to allowing somebody or some organization to define reality for them.
Yeah, that's great. Well, it's a process.
Yes.
And I think you said this, being generous with ourselves, realizing that this is a big deal. It's not easy. It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to happen through relationships. We're not responsible for it all. We need, we need other people speaking into our life. We need to be walking with other people. And those are just really great encouragements for us. Well, we're kind of at time here. So, any last word of encouragement before we close today?
Well, I think you've already highlighted the importance of being generous to yourself, being kind to yourself.
Yes,
I think one of the things we would suggest is to find safe people to share your story with and to start unpacking the story.
Amen. That's so true. And also, something that comes to my mind is remembering too that it's so wonderful now that you're out of Christian Science. You don't have to be perfect. It's mistakes are just okay. Not
Will you
only,
say that one more time?
you do not have to be perfect. Mistakes are okay. And not only are they okay, they're the way we grow and the way we learn and the way we stay humble in our humanity. We're one toward another, to be able to support each other and know that none of us are perfect. And that's a beautiful thing.
That's great. Oh, well, thank you so much, Pat and Heidi. We just really appreciate you being here today and just this wealth of information and these answers and just your care for us, just what you shared. It's really encouraging, because it's not easy to face our past, but these are really helpful things to think about as we begin our journey or even are in the midst of it and just feel kind of stuck and need to take that next step. So thank you so much
You
for
betcha.
today.
And thank you, Catherine, for giving us this opportunity
Absolutely.
to share, because
Yeah.
we want to, in a matter of speaking, see profit, see redemptive ends after the pain that we've been through and the experiences that we've had. And I mean, that's a human need. We don't want to. We want to feel like it's not going to go to waste.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah. I also I want to thank the ex-Christian Zionist for just partnering with us, collaborating with us in this event. Thank you to the representative here who's been helping with the Q&A. I want to thank Jack Miller, who's our tech director, just for his help for today. We're thankful for him. And also for our generous supporters who support this work financially, which allows us to host events like this and offer scholarships and pay our speakers. And your financial support helps make this possible. So we'd love for you to consider supporting the Get Wise Project through the Fellowship of Former Christian Scientists. Also, we hope you'll join us for our next webinar. We'll be hosting another one in the spring. Gina Roth is going to be doing our second webinar in this series, Facing Our Anger. So we'll be sending out information for that. We hope you'll sign up for our newsletter. And again, check out the other webinars on the YouTube channel. Our Get Wise support groups will be starting up in January. We'd love for you to join one of our groups. Also, we have a FFCS book club that's going to be studying Mere Christianity. So that will be another great opportunity if you want to walk with other former Christian Scientists in community. And also, we just would love for you to reach out. We just love to hear your story and connect you with resources, care, and community. So please do reach out. We'd love to talk with you. And just thank you again for being here today for our Get Wise webinar. Thanks again, Pat and Heidi. And we will see you all next time. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.